record button. All right. Awesome. All right. Thanks for joining us. So tonight's webinar is all about habit formation. Can you see the PowerPoint okay as well? How to build great habits and break bad ones. Awesome. So the main background for this presentation is this fantastic book that I picked up at Christmas time, that I got for Christmas actually, called Atomic Habits, and it's based on the content in the book is extremely effective for anyone from a high school student to a billionaire and anywhere in between, and it's a bestseller. James Clear's made his whole career on really about habit formation, and I always thought I was pretty disciplined, self-disciplined when it came to daily habits around training, nutrition and other things, but when I read this book it really opened up my eyes and really painted a very clear and practical picture about how I can improve my daily habits. And so I could honestly say I read a lot of professional development books, and this is probably one of the best ones I've read in the last few years, hence why I wanted to share some of the content with our members to see if there's anything that I can do to pass on and help people form better, in particular, training and nutrition habits. So if you do like the book, then absolutely jump on to Amazon or Booktopia and order a copy, as it will go into much more detail as to what we're going to touch on tonight. So to start with, what is a habit? Let's paint a pretty clear foundation. So just defining the term habit, it's a small behaviour or an action that you repeat over and over, and there's generally little thought attached to it. So if you think of the term habits, you think of picking your nose or biting your nails and things like that. Habits eventuate into really big outcomes in the long term, both good and bad. And if we start a good habit today, it won't lead to much in terms of short-term outcomes tomorrow, next week or next month. But if you stick with positive habits over the course of months and years, they'll add up to huge outcomes. If we stick with bad habits, generally, there's not much consequence in the short term, but over the long term, bad habits can really have some big issues. So it's a small behaviour or action you repeat over and over without little thought attached to it. We can also call habits the 1%ers that add up to huge outcomes in the long term. The 1%ers, the things that a lot of people might overlook and think is quite silly or unnecessary, but are extremely important. So habits usually take less than 2 minutes to complete, some of them a few seconds, like putting your fingers in your mouth and biting your nails. Habits can be both good and bad. They can lead to positive or negative outcomes. And they're done with very little thought or energy, which is why they can be really, really effective. Once you build a new routine, it leads to a habit. It really doesn't require any thought or any energy whatsoever, which is one of the reasons why they can be extremely effective. And they're birthed out of routines. So it's important to say that routines and habits aren't necessarily the same thing. Routines take a little bit longer, and routines are generally the culmination of multiple habits built into a system. And routines generally require a bit of thought, a bit of planning, but habits generally are the ones that are a little bit more automatic. Habits are more incremental steps, and they don't require a lot of thought. So generally with routines as well, we can make small routines habits if we repeat them about between 7 to 14 times. Research shows that if you repeat something, it will form a habit without you even noticing it. And habits stack up over the long term to give you huge gains, huge improvements in your overall quality of life, not just training, nutrition, but in terms of study habits, finance, anything that you can think of. Generally, success is the sum of our habits. So why are habits so important? A few key summaries. Success is the sum total of your daily habits. If you are fit and strong, it's generally because you've been really consistent with your training, and that's formed over many years. So for you guys just sort of restarting your fitness, you're noticing small changes already, but really the first week, there's not a lot of change. The second week, not so much. But it's only when you start getting 3-4 weeks in, a couple of months in, that you really start to notice those improvements. And it's because you're starting to build consistent habits with your training. If you're educated, it's generally because a person's formed really good study habits. If you're healthy, it's because of positive eating habits. If you're wealthy, it's because you've put into place really good financial savings habits and investment habits that have been implemented over the years. Again, habits in the short term don't lead to much, but they stack up to big success. Inversely, habits are, like we've said, a double-edged sword. They can either work for you or against you in the long term. So if you're unfit, you're unhealthy, you have little or no money in your bank account, it's generally because of the negative habits you've implemented over the years. And I'm sure we all know people who don't have a lot of money in their bank accounts, and it's not necessarily because they've missed out on opportunities, it's just they've made poor decisions when it comes to their money, haven't saved money, haven't put money aside for more important things. So the truth is, if we take a closer look at any successful person, whether it's a sports person, a business person, a celebrity, anyone who's got their lives in order, they'll have a stack of really positive habits that underpin their success. Cool. All right. So a couple other reasons why habits are so important. We touched on it just earlier. Habits require little to no extra effort, thought, or energy. So effectively, we're running on autopilot mode, which is really, really good. We can actually use our energy for other things. For saving energy, our brains use about 20% of our energy source throughout the day. And if we can save that 20% and use it toward other things, we're going to feel more energetic. It's difficult to start new habits. It does feel taxing. It feels draining in some ways, and it feels like it's a big challenge. But once you repeat these small habits over and over again, you're working in autopilot mode. They're automatic. So essentially, if we do the hard work early, set up a habit, we'll reap a lifetime of rewards. And I've got this little graphic here as well. This sort of highlights the importance of habits. So imagine this large ship, whether it's like a cargo ship or whatever, controlled by a captain. The captain relies pretty much on the compass for the direction. And if the compass is 1% out, in the first 5, 10, 20 miles, the direction of the ship's not going to be too far off course. But if it remains at that 1% out over 500 plus miles, the ship is way off course. And so habits work in much that same way. The little 1%ers in the short term, again, you won't see too many changes, but in the long term, they can either really put you in a bad spot or keep you in a really positive spot, keep you on course and in the right direction. And habits are really easy to overlook or overestimate, these little 1%ers, but they really give us that sense of control, direction, and continuity in our lives that we need in order to achieve our goals. All right, so let's get into a couple of the practical things around how we form really great habits and how we can break the bad habits. So in the book, Atomic Habits, one of the first principles is around these 3 layers of behavior change. So we've got the first layer, which is around identity. The second layer is around the processes, and the third layer is the outcomes. Now, most people don't achieve their goals because they write goals, but they focus purely on achieving those goals. For example, someone might come out to Outdoor Grit with the pure goal of, I just want to get fit, I just want to lose weight, I just want to get stronger. And purely focusing on that is not going to help the person achieve what they want. It's not going to get them in the right direction. Generally, that's a backwards approach, and it just doesn't work. So goals in and of themselves, they just don't work. Goal statements are great, they give you direction, but we also need to address the identity first, and then the processes, which are all those habits. So I've seen it many times working in gyms at Outdoor Grit. People have this goal of losing weight or looking a certain way, and they get really disappointed when things get rocky, things get tough. They don't see the weight dropping off, or they don't see the muscle building, and they don't see the fitness, because they're purely based on that outcome. Whereas what we're saying here is we actually need to start internally, start by addressing our identity, and then build these processes, which are the habits. And then along the way, we'll be working toward our goals. It's a far more effective process, and it's going to lead to a better probability of hitting our goals. So let's just break down that identity and explain really what we're talking about there. So identity is really about what you think and feel about yourself. Okay, so we want to start with the identity first, then the process, and then the outcomes will follow. So the identity, as I said, that's all about your thoughts, your views, and your beliefs about yourself. So behaviour change is really what we're talking about here. Behaviour change and habit formation can be really tough because it does require us to take a little bit of an introspective look about our inner belief system, what we think about ourselves, what we believe others think about ourselves, whether it's positive or negatives. We're often our own worst enemy. We often talk down to ourselves. We take on board negative criticism. We take things out of context, and that can really impact on us. And in the book, it talks about also the brain is like your hardware system, your hard drive, and the talk, whether it's verbally out loud or internally, the talk is like your software programs that you run. And if you run positive software programs, it's going to lead to changes in your identity. But if you allow negative self-talk, if you allow criticism to get into your head from the past, or someone has just said to you, if you allow that to impact you, it can really mess up your identity. So we need to form our new identity. We need to form a new identity when we're building habits. And it's really about what we think and feel about ourselves and what we say to ourselves. And if we can start with this new identity, we can then start to become that person to form those positive habits and then achieve those goals. So the first layer, the identity, really represents who you wish to become. So here's some really practical examples. So we've got positive identity statements on the left and then negatives on the right. So we want to come up with some really clear statements that are true, that they're positive, and that's going to help shape our habits. So for example, positive statements on the type of person who has self-control when it comes to food and drinking, as opposed to, I'll try, but I'll most likely fail. Or I've got no self-control. Or I know I'm going to go out with the girlfriends or boyfriends or blokes Saturday night, and I'm going to overeat, I'm going to drink. So those negative statements versus positive statements. What we're talking about is how we can shape our identity. Positive statements, I am an overcomer. I am the type of person who builds great habits. I am the type of person who trains no matter how tired I feel. I am resilient, and I'm working toward becoming a fit and healthy person, as opposed to all these other negative statements like I'm weak, I struggle with forming good habits, I can't do this, I'm never consistent, I'm not going to achieve my goals. So addressing our identity starts with these positive identity statements. Now, our identity statements, we need to be really honest, realistic, and also current. So in other words, for anyone just starting out, we're not going to say I'm a world-class athlete or I'm going to make it to the Olympics next year. We want to be realistic. So rather than saying I'm a world-class athlete, we could say I'm the type of person that trains every week, regardless of how tired I feel, regardless of the obstacles. If we constantly reaffirm and repeat that language, we're going to be in a really good place to start building those habits and then achieving our goals. So we want to be realistic, honest, and current with our positive identity statements. So essentially, if I just flip back a second to that slide, the 3 layers of behaviour change, we need to start by addressing our identity and start to build a new identity, how we think and feel about ourselves. And then we'll focus on building those habits right from the beginning, and then we'll start working toward our goals as outcomes. We can write goals, but we don't want to just purely focus on goals. We've got to start by addressing our identity and then build those habits. All right, so the habit formation process, this is really cool. This is a nice little loop that we can relate to when it comes to positive and negative habits. So these are the 4 steps to any habit, okay? And you could think about someone who has an alcohol addiction, a drug addiction, as well as anyone who struggles with eating, and then all the positives. People have great eating habits, great training habits, great financial habits, and so forth. So the process is cue, craving, response, reward. So the first step of habit formation is the cue. The cue is the trigger. It could be an internal or external trigger. The trigger that tells your brain to initiate a behaviour. So, for example, common cues, we see the big M's, the golden arches on the way home. We smell the pizza, we smell that beautiful baked bread in the morning. There's a trigger there. We hear someone say something. We might taste a little bit or smell a little bit of the food, or for smokers, it might be that nicotine rush, or alcohol might be the smell of alcohol or seeing something. So there are a lot of external cues that initiates the behaviour. Then there's also internal cues. It could be boredom. Oftentimes emotional eaters struggle with boredom. They might just pick at chips at the office desk or watching TV, not really hungry, but out of boredom and habit. That's how it starts. Also cues, internal cues could be a random memory or a thought, or that stirs up some sort of emotion from the past. So the first step of the habit formation process, it always starts with a cue. The second part is the craving, and generally this is like a hormonal release, and there's a really strong hormone that our brains release called dopamine, and we release that hormone when we see something that we know is going to bring us pleasure, whether it's that pizza, whether it's for a drug addict or an alcohol addict. It's seeing the cues, and then the brain starts releasing this dopamine. So cravings, salivating over something, recalling a feeling you got when you did or didn't do something, or you ate something healthy or ate something unhealthy. So these cravings have very underlying deep motives as well. So the craving is really the emotional or the motivational force behind the habit. It's what we want in terms of a different state of mind. So oftentimes an emotional eater, they're not eating because they're hungry, they're eating because they want to feel differently. So that's the essence behind the craving there. So it's about changing our state of mind. That's the craving, and there's a hormonal release that follows the cue. The third step is the response, which is the habit or behavior that we perform. So once we see something, once we feel something, once we hear or smell something, we crave it, and then we take action, we go for it. So we're driving past McDonald's, might be hungry, start salivating. We remember that last time we had that burger and the feeling that was nice about it for that bleak little 2 minutes, and then the response, let's pull into the drive-thru and get something. And then the fourth step of the habit formation process is the reward, and that's the end goal. That's the change in our physiology. That could be positive and it could be negative. All right? So every habit follows these 4 steps, both good habits and bad habits. There's a cue, there's a craving, there's a response, and then there's a reward. So in terms of breaking bad habits, we're going to focus on this one first, and then we'll talk about how to form great habits. All right, so breaking bad habits there, we've got 4 stages on the left: the cue, the craving, the response, the reward. If we want to break a bad habit, and as we listen to this, you could think of a bad habit that you've got, whether it's eating, biting your nails, whether you're a smoker, struggle with alcohol, anything whatsoever. The first step is you've got to make that cue invisible. In other words, reduce the amount of exposure, reduce the cue, or remove it altogether. And I'll go through some examples on the next slide. So we're going to make that cue invisible. We're going to get it out of sight so we can't hear it, we can't smell it, we can't touch it. We've got to shut down those negative thoughts or that boredom that might lead to a craving. Step number 2, how to break a bad habit: make it unattractive. Okay, so we want to reframe our mindset, highlight the benefits of avoiding the bad habit, or we can actually really focus on the negatives of continuing on in this 4-stage process if we go ahead and respond. So we're going to make that craving really unattractive if we want to break a bad habit. Response is the third one. How do we break a bad habit? We make the response really difficult by increasing the friction and the number of steps required to respond. And again, I'll give you an example on the next slide. And then the last one, the reward. We've got to make the reward unsatisfying, as awful and disgusting and unsatisfying as you can possibly make it. The chances are you will not repeat something that is not satisfying. If you make it satisfying, it is highly likely that you'll repeat it again. So review, document the impacts, count the costs, count the losses of your bad habits. So if someone struggled with gambling, for example, the reward make it unsatisfying. Counting the cost of that loss, how much money you're actually losing, how much it's impacting on your mental health, on relationships and so forth. All right, so let's have a look at some examples of breaking bad nutrition habits. Number one, the cue, how do we make it invisible? Number one, don't buy processed foods. If it's not in the house, you can't eat it. Fairly straightforward. If you do have stuff in the house that's processed, high in sugar, high in fats, high in salts, throw it in the bin. Get rid of the cue, make it invisible. And another thing is we're bombarded with media. We want to avoid looking at ads on our devices, on billboards. It might be, and also cues and responses are kind of, there's some similarities there. We might drive home a different way. If we know we're going to drive home past junk food corner, let's go home a different way, just to make those cues invisible. How do we make the craving unattractive? We can think of or write down harmful effects of eating these processed foods, both now and in the long term. Some examples of eating processed foods. You're going to feel pretty crappy without 5-10 minutes afterwards, loss of energy for the next few hours, long-term weight gains, short-term and long-term feeling, loss of self-control, shame, all those things like that. Recall the disappointment you feel after you eat these foods. The reward never meets the standards of the craving, and that's a fact as well. We crave something and we think it's going to be better than what it really is, but the reward never meets expectations. That's one of the bad parts about nutrition and also other addictions as well. So the response, we're going to make that response difficult by increasing the friction. We can remove all processed foods from the house, delete any takeaway apps from your phone, so it's really hard to order takeaway food. Drive home a different way, so you avoid certain takeaway places or other places where you might buy bad food. Have only healthy foods out on the table or in the fridge. Having that fruit bowl out on the kitchen counter, and getting rid of any easy to cook harmful foods and processed foods is a great way to make that response really difficult. And then the last one, how do I make a reward really unsatisfying if I want to break a bad nutrition habit? Note down how crap you feel after eating processed foods. Start a journal. Journals are really helpful for people who aren't aware of how they're feeling, that they might forget about how they're feeling after they've done, after they've binged or eaten a stack of chocolate or a big bowl of ice cream. So we can journal, and after that 5 or 10 minutes when the dopamine hit has subsided, we generally get this little moment of feeling guilty and shameful. And that's a really good time to actually write down how we're feeling and what the fallout was of eating something really harmful, really bad. And then the last one, make it unsatisfying. Ponder on the long-term harmful impacts to you and family if you continue to remain unhealthy. I know of a few people at Outdoor Grit and other places that I train as well, their family members are really genuinely concerned about the person's health. And they're not doing anything about it, and it's impacting on stress within the family unit. So there's some practical stuff on how to break bad habits. Let's flip to the good stuff. How do we start some new good habits? So we've still got those 4 stages, got the cue, craving, response, and reward. If we want to start a good habit, we've got to make the cue really, really obvious. We can't miss it, in other words. So we can design our home environment or our workplace or our car and make it really easy so we can see the positive cues that we want to follow through on. And in all honesty, if we get the first part right, the cue, the rest generally follows. It's really, really easy to start a good habit if you can get your cues right. So set up your environment, set up positive cues around your home, around your workspace, and also make those bad habits go away by making the negative cues invisible, essentially. And then the second one, the craving. How can we make that craving to start a good habit really, really attractive? So for example, hanging around like-minded people, like the two of you guys there, iron sharpens iron, you're doing it together, you're going to workouts together, you're reflecting on it together on the walk home, I would assume, talking about it and so forth. So that's how we can make it attractive, and you're doing it together, like you're walking to the park together as well. Also, to make a craving attractive, we can pair an action with something that we need to do. So in other words, we'll talk about an example afterwards, but one thing I like to do is the night before I get up to go for a workout, I'll brush my teeth. That's something I need to do. That's something I'm good at. And so I've stacked a new habit over the years, not new anymore, but over the years I stacked the habit of once I brush my teeth, I set out my workout gear in the bathroom, set it all out, and so I pair those two actions together. And so it's really, really easy for me in the mornings to get up and then get dressed because I've already put out that gear and I've done it the night before by pairing those two habits together. The response, making it really, really easy, prime the environment, similar to the cues, prime the environment and reduce the friction, remove the number of steps needed to respond to your craving. And then the last one, the reward, make that reward really satisfying. I love at the end of our sessions at Outdoor Grit, we give each other high fives, we reflect as we're doing our cool downs, talk about how good we feel. Generally, it's within about 3 to 5 minutes after a workout, you start to get that euphoric feeling as the cortisol hormone starts to subside, and then we release the endorphins and serotonin, and there's a few other hormones that play there as well. Our body feels great. It's being rewarded for the hard work, and it's rewarding you back with the release of some really good hormones. You walk away in that morning at 7 a.m. feeling like you've done some real hard work and you're set for the rest of the day. So reinforcing those feelings, reinforcing the great choices you've made, that's how we can make it satisfying. Going around encouraging others, encouraging yourselves there as you're walking home. And then there's other things you can do to reward yourself after you've completed a positive habit. So here's an example, how do we start a good habit for training? You guys are already on the right track here, but some other things that might be helpful as well. Like I said, prime your environment. You can set out your active wear the night before. Make the change area in the morning. So I get changed in our kids' bathroom because my wife, she sleeps in still until about 6 a.m. Not that that's a sleep in, but I just don't want to wake her up. So I've got a really nice setup in our kids' bathroom. I've got my active wear out. I've got my favourite towel, and I look forward to that favourite towel. I've got a really nice bar of soap, and so I have a cold shower, and cold showers are fantastic. I highly recommend that as well. Gets you going in the morning. But I'll prime my environment. Everything's ready, and all I need to do is set the alarm, and then bam, straight out of bed at 20 past 5 in the morning. Another way to make the cue obvious: set out a weekly workout or a meal prep schedule on a Sunday and pin it to your fridge so it's there, it's in your face. Other cues in terms of like nutrition as well, doing meal prepping. So you open the fridge, boom, there's a whole heap of meals, fresh, they're healthy, they're ready to go. How do we make that craving attractive? Recall that euphoric feeling. Think about the short and long-term benefits, acknowledgement from others, the physical change, the more energy, improved mobility, social acceptance, personal satisfaction. The response, how do we make that response really easy? Similarly to the cues there, prime your environment. You can do some other things. Train first thing in the morning. I'm a really big believer that people who have great habits, they do a lot in the morning before they get busy rather than in the evenings. And even at Outdoor Grit, we get more people in the mornings rather than the evenings, because the evenings are sort of hit and miss. People work around work and other commitments, but in the morning, you know that's your time and there's nothing that's going to get in the way, and that's how you start your day. Make it easy, book in your sessions in advance, set your alarm, go to bed early, or if you're training in the evenings, for those people who might be listening in, leave work 10 minutes early. Other things, be committed to messaging someone or telling someone that you're going to train tomorrow morning or at this time. Make it satisfying, reward, focus on those feelings 3 to 5 minutes after the workout. We'll talk about streaks. When we want to document a streak and you feel good about setting a hot streak of continuous workouts without skipping a workout. And we can reward ourselves with a massage. Let's say you get 10 workouts in a row, reward yourself with a massage. Or when you get 30 workouts in a row, or when you get that 50, reward yourself by buying a new set of activewear. Make that reward really satisfying and reinforce your self-control. Upgrade that identity as well. Those identity statements can evolve. They can be constantly edited as you get fitter and healthier. All right. So, a couple other things, 4 key principles for making great habits. You're in the winning seat here, guys. Accountability partners. doing it together is far more effective than going it alone. And for people who don't train with a partner or a friend, they can still be accountable to others, like myself, the coach. I encourage people to message me and say, Dan, I'm going to be there tomorrow, just letting you know I'm going to be there at 6:15 a.m. and they're making themselves accountable. Booking in those sessions as well through Zen Planner is really helpful as well and make that accountable. Start streaking, not running down the beach naked, but build a hot streak. Aim for something 10 sessions in a row without missing a session, 20 sessions in a row. And then if you break it, that's okay. That doesn't mean failure. But if you don't come out then for 2-3 weeks, then we start to have issues. We start to lose that habit. So build a streak, mark it off, record it, try your best to keep it going, set some goals for your streaks. Habit stacking, like I said, I set out my workout gear after brushing my teeth. That's the habit. Find out a habit that you currently do, then build your new habit directly after you complete that first one. And then here's another one for habit stacking. So basically after completing XYZ habit, I will do this habit. So find something that you do really well without thinking and then introduce that new habit right at the end so you can stack the two together and join the two together. Scheduling, so book in your training and nutrition time, use Zen Planner, have a calendar or some sort of chart on the fridge if that makes it even more visible, and make a commitment to yourself. Scheduling means basically saying, I will do XYZ, this behaviour, I will train at St. Helens Park at 6:15 a.m. Wednesday, or I will eat 5 healthy meals Monday through to Friday this week at 6 p.m. each night. So there's 4 additional really good principles for making these great habits. A little bit of homework, I challenge you both. Break one bad habit this week. It could be biting your nails, picking your nose, whatever it could be. It could be nutrition. Maybe it's binge eating chocolate or ice cream after 7 p.m. I challenge you to break one habit using that cue, craving, response, reward process. And let's start one new habit. It could be a habit of reading a book. It could be a habit of studying something like professional development. You're interested in the topic. It could be a habit of saving money toward putting in a pool or whatever that might be. So that's your homework, putting all this theory into practice. And again, if you really enjoy the content, I'd strongly encourage this book here, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I've read it a couple of times already. It is one of the best professional development books that I've come across in a long time. If you have any questions, message me or chat to me at the park, and I can certainly get back to you and help you with anything that you might have. It's fun. The COVID-friendly one. Well done for jumping into the webinar. Thanks, guys, for joining in.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. I hope this has been helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's interesting how easy it seems to form bad habits. Why